So you've clicked on the video and you're wondering, is spin selling still relevant? Well, the answer is, well, maybe. Now, spin selling obviously isn't some fancy new sales hack, but a battle-tested strategy developed decades and decades ago, but can it still give you an edge today? Well, in this video, I'm going to deep dive into the spin framework. I'm going to unpack what each one of those letters means, what it represents, and how it can potentially help you transform your sales conversations. Because imagine asking questions, uncover hidden needs, build trust with your buyers, and ultimately close more deals. That's the potential power of spin selling, and I'm going to show you exactly how to use it in this video. I'm also going to explain, to be very real about all this, I'm going to explain when this approach is going to feel a little bit dated with your prospects and when you should probably avoid using it altogether. Let's dive into the first move of spin selling, and that is situation questions. Think of these questions as the intel gathering before you launch your sales pitch. The goal here is to uncover your buyer's world, their current processes, their challenges, and maybe the tools that they're currently using as well. Why do we want to do this? Well, the better we understand the buyer's situation, the better you can tailor your product positioning to it, and so show how your product solves specific problems that the buyer has. And here's the cool thing. A lot of this intel can now be found online through research for a buyer's website or their LinkedIn page. Therefore, you should absolutely try and avoid any situation questions in your meetings with your prospects that could be uncovered via a quick Google search. If you ask situation questions that you should probably already know before you even jump on the call with a prospect, you're going to dramatically reduce the buying temperature of that conversation. If the buying temperature goes too low during the sales process, you're going to blow it and the buyer's going to start ghosting your calls. But that doesn't mean that you should skip asking situation questions entirely. Because imagine showing up to a meeting, you've already done your research, you already understand the buyer's situation, but then you start asking further insightful situation questions to go deeper into it. The buyer is going to feel heard, they're going to feel valued, and you're going to gather even more intel than what you can find online alone. Now, of course, the kind of questions you're going to ask depend on your product or your service, but some general situation questions to paint a picture around this for you might include, can you walk me through how your team currently handles X? Are there any specific goals you're hoping to achieve with Y? What resources are being allocated to this project? Or maybe you'll ask, are there any other priorities that supersede what we're talking about today? And remember, these are just starting points. The key here is to actively listen and then ask follow-up questions based on your prospect's initial situation answers. And this intel is going to be absolutely crucial later on when we move on to need payoff questions, which will guide the buyer to see the true value of the solution that you're bringing to them. Okay, so we talked about using situation questions to understand your buyer's world. Now let's dive into the next step of the acronym, problem questions. This is where you're going to uncover the buyer's real hidden struggles. Think of it like this. You want to be a detective. You want to search for clues. These questions help you identify specific problems that your buyers face, the things that fall into the selling cliche that keep your buyers up at night. Why do you want to know this? Because the better you understand the buyer's pain points, the faster you can show how your product potentially can be the hero, can swoop in, can save the day. And think of it like this. If you can't uncover a problem that the buyer has, then there's no need for them to break out the status quo that they're currently in and to make a change, to purchase your product or service. So you need to uncover some kind of problem, right? It's as simple as that. Now, don't forget, when a buyer makes a purchase, it's not all rainbows and unicorns. There's always going to be a level of pain, which we call the pain of implementation, that they've got to get through before the prospect is going to get the desired results from working with you. And if you can't uncover enough pain to help your buyer understand that they're going to go through this little bit of pain implementation to get all this results on the other side, then why would they take any action? Why would they continue having more conversations with you? Why would they hand over a big fat stack of cash to get the deal done? They wouldn't, right? Gene McNaughton points out the importance of identifying your buyer's problems on a recent Salesman.com podcast episode.
What you want to understand is there a gap? Is there a gap between where they are and where they want to be? Is there something they're trying to do that they're not getting the outcome of? Because the truth is, Baron, if there's no gap, there's no sale. And our job as sellers is to understand that gap like a doctor would and be prepared to make a prescription.
Okay, so here are some problem questions that you can use to dig deeper into your buyer's pain. You can ask them, how important is it to solve X this year? Do you think that this could be solved? What do you think would need to get done to get to the bottom of this? What is stopping you from solving this yourself? And always remember, this is a conversation that you're having with your prospect, right? This isn't a series of questions that you found on some random dude told you on a YouTube video. You've got to actively listen to the buyer's answers, and then don't be afraid to ask further follow-up questions to get to the bottom of all of this. The more that you understand your prospect's struggles, the easier it's going to be to transition to the next step of the process, which is implication questions. These are the questions that really hit home, and they show the buyer that their problems are really costing them, and so they should take some action. They should move forward. They should hopefully purchase your product. Okay, so we talked about situation questions to map your buyer's world and problem questions to unearth their hidden struggles. Now things get a little bit more interesting with implication questions. And here is the deal. You've identified the buyer's pain points, but now you need to show them why those problems are a big deal. If you get this right, you're going to really start ramping up the buying temperature. And a simple metaphor to understand this, right, is imagine you leave the tap on, you leave it running overnight. Who cares? It's a minor annoyance. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. What if the sink was blocked and then you left it on for a few hours? What if you left it on when you were on holiday and the place flooded and everything in your house got wrecked? Here you can see the implication of the problem that the buyer is facing. The goal with implication questions is to show the bigger picture and the potential consequences if the buyer's problems aren't addressed in hopefully a timely manner. And so here are some implication questions that you can use to really double down on the potential pain that your buyers are going to face if they refuse to take action. You can ask, how does X affect your work? Would resolving this impact your career? How much are you spending on this right now? And how much will you have spent on this over the next year or so? And you can ask, if you didn't have to put up with all this crap, how else would you be spending your time? Remember here, the goal isn't scare tactics. It never should be in B2B sales, right? But it's about gently nudging the prospect to see the potential impact of the problems that they've probably been staring at in the face for days, weeks, or months now. It's all about raising that buying temperature to a point where the buyer would feel like an idiot if they didn't take action. And when you ask these questions, once the buyer understands the cost of inaction, they're going to be much more receptive to the next step of the process, where we look at need payoff questions. This is where you're going to show your buyer exactly how your product solves their problems and how it can potentially deliver the big wins that they're craving. Right, we've conquered situation questions, unearthed the hidden struggles with problem questions, and highlighted the consequences of these problems with implication questions. Now it's time for the real magic, the need payoff questions. And these need payoff questions are there to show the buyer the beautiful, brighter, bolder future reality that is waiting for them if they buy our product or service. And here is the key. You've got to focus on value, not your product's features. Don't talk about how amazing your product is. Talk about how it's going to make the prospect's life easier, more profitable, or less risky. Joey Coleman laid more emphasis on the value of focusing on value in a recent Salesman podcast episode.
I think so many salespeople spend their time focused on the features of their product or service. And then your more enlightened salespeople spend a lot of time focused on the benefits of your product or service. I think the top salespeople in the world are actually previewing the feeling and the experience of using your product or service.
Okay, now here's a few examples of need payoff questions that you can use in the real world today. So you might ask, would X dramatically increase Y? If all this went well, how could this change your chances of career progression? What would lead to Z new revenue? What would getting this resolved mean for your finances? So there's a few examples for you. And can you see how these questions shift the focus for the buyer? They're not pitching your product's features, which is essentially selfish, and the buyer doesn't really give a shit about them anyway. Instead, they're painting a picture of a future where the buyer's problems are solved and the success is inevitable, which obviously they do care about. And these need payoff questions can very quickly get you into the zone of let's do this, which is where deals happen quicker, deal sizes are larger, and quite frankly, you're going to feel like a professional solving someone's problem rather than a sleazy salesperson trying to get your sales pitch and ram it down the throats of your prospects, which is going to make you feel gross, it's going to make you feel slimy. No one wants to be that dude or dudette. And if you follow the spin process, by the time you ask these questions, the buyer is going to be practically begging you to show them how your solution can make their dream a reality. And that, my friend,
is how I met your mother.
Is how you close the deal with spin selling. Now, the real question, is spin selling still useful right now as I record this video? Well, Yes and no. The spin selling questions are undoubtedly useful, right? But sales has become a lot more complex than it was when spin was originally developed. There are more stakeholders, higher levels of status quo that people are stuck in. People just don't want to take risks in the corporate environment. And probably rightly so, there's an even higher disdain for old school sales tactics. So make sure you're leveraging the important parts of the spin selling process, but absolutely make sure that you're using it alongside a modern complex sales process like what you can find for free in my book, Selling Made Simple, which you can grab a completely free copy of this in the link below this video. And if you'd like to learn other questions that you must ask to close complex deals, click the video that's on the screen right now and continue making selling simple.